Welcome everyone, I'm Dale and this is Cinema Historia. Rich snobs, an engagement, and an eccentric family. This week we're going back to 1938 for a romantic comedy film called You Can't Take It With You, starring Jean Arthur, Lionel Barrymore, James Stewart, and Edward Arnold. And this is directed by Frank Capra. So where does our story begin this week? Well, it begins with a successful banker by the name of Anthony P. Kirby, played by Edward Arnold. And he's just returned home from Washington, D.C. He intends to buy up a 12-block radius around a competitor's factory to put him out of business. But there's one house that will not sell out. Kirby instructs his real estate broker to offer a huge sum of money for the house, and if it's not accepted, to cause trouble for the family. Meanwhile, a member of that family, Grandpa Vanderhoff, played by Lionel Barrymore, convinces a banker named Poppins to pursue his dream of making animated toys and to come live with them. Kirby's son, though, Tony, played by James Stewart, is a vice president in the family company and has fallen in love with a company stenographer by the name of Alice Sycamore, played by Jean Arthur. When Tony proposes marriage, Alice is worried that her family would be looked upon poorly by Tony's rich and famous family. In fact, Alice is the only normal member of the Sycamore family, but Alice's family lives in the house that will not sell out. Kirby and his wife strongly disapprove of Tony's choice for marriage. Before she accepts, Alice forces Tony to bring his family over to get better acquainted with his future in-laws. And who are his future in-laws? Well, one makes animated toys, one's a ballet dancer, one's a playwright, and another couple make illegal fireworks in the basement. So now you see why Alice is a little worried. So, does Kirby purchase the house and move forward in his business venture? Do Tony and Alice stay engaged and start with their wedding plans? Or does everything fall apart when the two families meet? A great romantic comedy. It was taken from a play, a 1936 play by George Kaufman and Moss Hart of the same name. It was a commercial success. The film received 7 nominations and won 2 Academy Awards. It won Best Picture and Best Director for Frank Capra. This was Capra's 3rd Oscar for Best Director in just 5 years. The other 2 were It Happened One Night in 1934 with Clark Gable, and Mr. D Goes to Town in 1936 with Gary Cooper. Plus, it was nominated in 1998 among the American Film Institute's list of the top 100 greatest American movies. And that it is. So the trivia question this week, were there any actors from this film that starred in another Frank Capra movie? Were there any actors from this film that starred in another Frank Capra movie? So, a little more history and the answer to our trivia question coming up next. Now, since people seem to be having a lot of fun in this film, including a toy maker, dancer, inventor, playwright, and a musician, and so on, what did everyone else do for fun during the Great Depression? Well, to explain, after the Wall Street stock market crash of October 24th, 1929, it was the longest, deepest, and most widespread depression of the 20th century. 15 million Americans could not find work. So what did people do for fun during these times? Well, here's a list. People who could not afford books spent time reading in libraries. Inexpensive amusements such as backyard games, puzzles, card games, and board games were popular. In fact, Parker Brothers introduced the Monopoly game in 1935 and the game Sorry the previous year in 1934. The price of a board game was $1, which would have been about the equivalent to $15.45, converting over in today's money. Even Major League Baseball rosters and players were cut. 14 minor leagues were eliminated as attendance had fallen by 40%. So to help, night games were introduced. Watching dance marathons where contestants danced till they dropped. As long as they kept dancing, they had food, shelter, and a chance to win a cash prize. Here's an interesting one. Lining up to see people sitting on poles. Yes, Elvin Shipwreck Kelly in 1930 had as many as 20,000 people watching him eat, sleep, and shave atop a 225-foot flagpole in Atlantic City for 49 days. Yeah, just don't turn over in your sleep. Seeing high-tech Hollywood movies. Tickets cost under a quarter during the 1930s, which was down from 35 cents in 1929. So big budget musicals such as 42nd Street in 1933 and The Wizard of Oz in 1939 were very popular. Walt Disney also released the first full-length feature animated film, The Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, in 1937. Walt Disney also started the Mickey Mouse Club. Here's a big one for my brother and I back in the 1960s when we were kids, as there was a hill on the other end of our street. Soapbox derbies. Yes, in 1933, a journalist named Myron Scott noticed kids racing soapbox cars in Dayton, Ohio. He took some pictures and helped organize bigger races. The following year, Chevrolet sponsored the first All-American Soapbox Derby with attendance of over 40,000 spectators. The next year, the races moved to Akron, where it's been run ever since. Here's another neat one, reading comic books. Kids around the country grabbed the funny pages to read Dick Tracy, Flash Gordon, and Little Orphan Annie. A comic book that costs around 10 cents back then could be traded. Yeah. Tuning in to hit radio shows. This was actually considered the golden age of radio, as 40% of families owned a radio. Famous shows include The Shadow, Sherlock Holmes, The Lone Ranger, and Buck Rogers. Miniature golf was a popular fad during the 1930s, and the first electronic coin-operated pinball machines were introduced. Spending money on entertainment was out of the question for most people, so the U.S. put the nation back to work, including artists and entertainers, in its assistance programs. Probably why there are a lot of musicals and comedies made during that time to help boost morale, and a Frank Capra movie will help with that. And the answer to our trivia question this week: were there any actors from this film that starred in another Frank Capra movie? Yeah, you probably knew the answer to this one. Yes. But how many? Well, 13 actors from this film appeared in It's a Wonderful Life in 1946. Pretty neat. This is a really funny movie, actually. If you like movies like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or Mr. Deeds Comes to Town, or It Happened One Night, I would highly recommend putting this one on its list. Even though it's a real eccentric family, you really do warm up to them as the movie progresses along. If there's another Frank Capra movie you'd like, or any other, please leave it in the comments for a review. I gotta go. Alice's father is going to show me his new firecracker invention in the basement, and I'm ready. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope to see you back next week.